Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network here on a Hot Take Friday. We are presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. You know I absolutely love them. They take great care of my home. And again, it is a Hot Take Friday, and we've got a lot of hot takes to get into today. And also, I was just on Boston radio yesterday. We'll talk about that as well, since a lot of you apparently were watching here. The Still Billy Nation in the YouTube chat says that they watched me on in Boston radio yesterday. So I want to start on this Hot Take Friday. Again, 440 Sports Network. Like and subscribe, everybody. It's free. Like it. Subscribe if you're not already subscribing, but that's okay. But I want to start with this, which is just a simple, tiny little recap, not to waste too much time. So yesterday I started the show and I said, guys, I may be a little distracted. My kid had an accident at preschool and he was at the hospital. And last night he had to have surgery. So I'm going to tell you what all happened. He is fine. I want everybody to know that. He is fine. Yesterday we got a call. I was putting together the board. The Las Jared Sportsbook and Casino, the big board odds yesterday. So I was putting together these big board odds and doing that graphic and everything, which, by the way, I'm very, very proud of. If you're looking at the stream, I'm very, very proud of that graphic. But I was putting that graphic together, and Lindsay called me, and she was kind of sick anyway, so she was working from home, and she called me. And so when Lindsay calls me in my own house, it's kind of odd. Like, you know, we live in the same house usually. And apparently the school had called her and said that something had happened to Jack. And she was like, apparently they've called an ambulance. And I'm like, okay. So now I'm trying to figure out what's going on. The school then calls me and they say, yeah, apparently Jack's hand was in the door and somebody opened the door. And his, as they described it to me, if you're a little squeamish, I'm sorry. His index finger was kind of hanging off to the side a little bit. Not the whole finger, but the tip of the index finger was kind of hanging off to the side. And Lindsay, God bless her, I love her, she freaking lost it. And I am now kind of in this, okay, all right, let's figure this out. Let's handle this. So we went to the hospital. My mom actually went to the school. She rode in the ambulance with him to the hospital. He's only 10 months old. And he was a real trooper yesterday. I want to thank the people at the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. They are freaking fabulous. And I thought they just did a fantastic job taking care of our kid. So last night, he ended up having surgery on the finger. He was good to go when we left around 11 o'clock at night. They put him in one of those club casts, so he looks like an inside linebacker who's going to go punch out the football with that club cast. He did find a way to wiggle out of it this morning, so we had to go back to Vanderbilt. They had to get another cast on, but he's good. He's good as new. They did a great job. The surgeon staff, everything else. The school, contacted us. Accidents happen with kids. So I just want everybody to know, I saw your messages yesterday. I don't know if you were watching the show yesterday. I was probably a little distracted, and I was a little distracted because of that. I apologize to Braden and to James Foster. We were supposed to do the Hot Read podcast today. We weren't able to do that because of all this going on. But I really did appreciate everybody kind of having, the support and everything else. And there was a moment yesterday where Lindsay had texted me that we thought he was going to have a smaller surgery than he ended up having. And so I was on the air when I read the text of he's going to end up having a bigger surgery. And I was like, okay, back to the Titans coaching search, which isn't always the easiest thing in the world. So I want to thank you for everybody that reached out. And I want to thank you for you people, the YouTube chat, everything else that said something. Jack's good to go. And now he's got one of those casts on like an inside linebacker, and hopefully he doesn't smack the pug with it. Okay. Hot Take Friday. The return of the great Mike Vrabel. That's right. And I know Sunday's game is going to be simply about the return of the great Mike Vrabel. And Amy Adams Strunk tried to take a little of that attention away earlier this week when she fired Brian Callahan. And she sent Chad Brinker up there to speak for her and look like a moron. And they did. And there was talk about Mike McCoy and everything else. But the reality is, since the schedule came out, this was a marquee matchup. The return of the great Mike Vrabel. And I've said this about 15 times this week, so it probably shouldn't come as a surprise. I said it yesterday when I was on the radio in Boston. But I am picking the Tennessee Titans to beat the New England Patriots and the great Mike Vrabel on Sunday at Nissan Stadium. And I am picking the Titans to win because I am convinced that I know Mike Vrabel better than the national media knows Mike Vrabel. And I know Mike Vrabel better than the city of Boston knows Mike Vrabel. And the one thing I wondered, when Mike Vrabel was going to get a job, and we knew he was going to as a coach somewhere else, the one thing I wondered was, is Mike Vrabel going to change when he gets his second coaching job? Would Mike Vrabel take the year off and look in the mirror and say, I've got to change? Or would Mike Vrabel look at it and say, I'm the great Mike Vrabel and those hillbillies in Tennessee are fucking stupid? Now, I figured that was probably what was going to happen, but I wondered, was Vrabel going to look in the mirror and say, man, I really blew it with some of those coaching hires. Man, I should have had more humility and shown the owner at least a little bit of respect. But all I've seen out of Mike Vrabel since he's become a head coach again is that Mike Vrabel has doubled down on who he was here. And that's fine. He probably thinks his brand of football works, his brand of coaching, because everybody in the national media and everybody around him tells him how great he is all the time. But just this week, I saw a Mike Vrabel moment in which he openly criticized the referees for not watching the clips that the league sends out to the teams every week, which is basically saying, I do more work than the referees. And here was Mike Vrabel on WEEI in Boston, where, feeling himself at 4-2, he takes a shot at the refs.
How can they fix this? How can they
I got a tough enough job to coach this football team.
Yeah, could you fix that in the offseason?
I mean, there's not much. It becomes comical at a point. Yeah, they send these videos out every week, and they do a great job. Walt Anderson does a great job. Ramon George does a great job, and they send these videos out. And, of course, me and Stretch, we hang on to every word. And then I'll see something during the game. I'm like, did they even watch the video? Like, what? Like me and Stretch, are just like, we're pausing it, rewinding it. We're like, oh, I love these videos. And then I'm like, hey, did you watch the video last week? Like they talked about this exact thing.
It's like they just sent them out without watching them.
Me and Stretch watch them.
Me and Stretch watch the videos, but I don't think the referees watch the videos. Translation: Mike Vrabel, feeling himself at 4-2, says that the referees don't do their job. How Mike Vrabel is that? And, of course, everybody around him just yakking it up. That's a good one, Mike. Yeah, I'm sure the referees on Sunday won't see that cut, hear that cut, know about that cut. And it reminded me of something he did while he was here. That, again, it's fine because it's funny, but it hurts your football team. Remember when Vrabel emailed the referees, the entire league, when it came to that exact same transaction, the video in which the league sends out to the 32 teams, which, by the way, again, if you wonder how Kuharsky got the actual video of Brian Callahan fucking up against the Colts, I think that probably solves it for you. But remember in 2022, when Vrabel fired off an email to the entire league that Adam Schefter somehow got his hands on, quote, I appreciate the time and energy that goes into these videos, Vrabel wrote at the time, but I suggest we devote every minute of our officiating department's time ensuring our officiating crews are as well trained in the clarifications we work to create in the offseason and that each crew is as consistent as possible. Thank you. The Mike Vrabel passive-aggressive, I can't help myself, so I fired off this email when if I had walked down the hallway and asked anybody, should I send that email, they would say no. That is Mike Vrabel to a T. He knows better. He's smart. He knows better. He can't help himself. That's who he is. So when I saw that cut of Vrabel yakking it up, laughing about the officiating, talking about how, again, he does more work than the officials do, I said, that is an example, a microcosm of the reality that Mike Vrabel is the exact same guy in New England that he was here. And if there is anything that I have learned about Mike Vrabel, the Mike Vrabel that was here as the head coach of the Titans, it is that games like Sunday, overwhelming favorites versus a young quarterback and a team that nobody is talking about is absolute poison to a Mike Vrabel coached football team. And when I was on in Boston yesterday and I heard they are feeling it in Boston, they are like, the great Mike Vrabel has arrived. We're 4-2. Bring back the Patriot way. But I'm like, guys, I experienced the exact same thing in 2018 with everybody else. I remember when they started 3-1, I was at the game when Mariota hit Corey Davis in the end zone against Philadelphia as time expired to start off 3-1. And those were 3 straight Vrabel specials. They beat the Houston Texans with Tyler Merritt's off the practice squad at tackle and Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. They beat Jacksonville the next week when Jacksonville was good. They beat Jacksonville next week with Mariota who couldn't throw. And then they beat the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. They were 3-1. Vrabel Kool-Aid was being drank all around the city. And then they had 3 straight Vrabel specials the other way, and they were 3-3. And they finished 9-7, and they missed the playoffs. I remember the losses to Kyle Allen in Carolina, followed by the victories against Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. I remember the Titans without having any practice in 2020 for 2 weeks because of COVID, playing on a Tuesday night against the Buffalo Bills and absolutely housing them, only to play a 4-11-1 Cincinnati Bengal team and get their asses kicked. That is the Vrabel special. And when Mike Vrabel and the Patriots went on the road on Sunday Night Football and beat the Bills, I said, what goes up must come down, and Mike Vrabel is going to lose one of the next 2 games against the wretched Saints or the wretched Titans. They beat the Saints last week, so because of it, I'm picking the Titans. Mike Vrabel right now can do no wrong. He is 4-2. They can do no wrong. Everybody thinks now Drake Maye is a franchise quarterback based off of the first 6 weeks of the season. We've lived through that. We've been through this. You've been through this. I've been through this. We all lived it, and it can be incredibly joyful when Mike Vrabel takes a team that lost its soul in Derrick Henry to a broken foot to LA on Sunday Night Football and dominates the eventual Super Bowl champion Rams, only to follow it up the next week with a loss to Tyrod Taylor and the 4-13 Texans at home. So I've seen this. I know the Vrabel special. You know the Vrabel special. You remember the game that Zach Wilson and Corey Davis just bombed the ball all over the Titans? That's what happens with Mike Vrabel. And this game has that type of abysmal, gut-wrenching loss that Vrabel seems to always wander into after getting one of those incredible euphoric victories. And then there's the Titans on the other side of this. The Titans are going to get an interim coach bounce this week with Mike McCoy taking over from Brian Callahan. And I think they're going to get a bigger interim coach bounce than most people would probably assume, simply because that is how unbelievably disorganized I thought Brian Callahan was. And I'm serious. I thought Brian Callahan was that bad. And I know you did too. But I thought Brian Callahan was so bad and so disorganized that, again, taking a replacement level coach, which is what Mike McCoy is. You can go get a Mike McCoy whenever you want. is going to make a difference because Brian Callahan was so below replacement level. I've said this. Vrabel's a good coach. Now, I don't think Vrabel's as good of a coach as everybody makes him out to be, but I think Vrabel is a good coach. Callahan was a terrible coach. There is no comparison between the two. So they're going to get the interim coach bump from Mike McCoy taking over. And again, because Mike McCoy is a grown-up coach, it will be, I believe, night and day better than Callahan. But the other thing is, I think the reason the interim coach bounce exists is because for a game, for a short period of time, it is a great motivating factor when your team tells you you suck. Hey, everybody knows when the coach gets fired, it's really a reflection of them. And so as all those Titan players were kind of crapping on Callahan, there was this sentiment of, hey, you do know that this means that you suck, right? The Penn State interim coach got up there and said, the reason I'm up here is because we failed James Franklin. And for a game, I think that that gives you a bounce. So there's the initial bounce you get. Everybody gets that bounce. And then there is the Brian Callahan is not the coach this week bounce that I assume the Titans will get because Callahan was that incompetent of a head coach. And I also think this. I think Mike McCoy is a legitimate threat to win the job. If I was the owner of the Titans, Mike McCoy probably would not have much of a shot of getting the head coaching job. But I don't own the Titans. And I've seen how Amy operates, and I know it's important to Amy. And I think Mike McCoy, in his own right, is smart enough to read the room. And he is smart enough to know that this week's game is probably the single most important game for the rest of his career. Mike McCoy can be a senior offensive assistant or a quarterback's coach or maybe a coordinator if he wants to continue coaching after this. This is his only shot to ever be a head coach again. And Mike McCoy probably knows because I know that Amy Adams Strunk wants nothing more than to beat Mike Vrabel. She knows this team stinks. She knows this season is lost. And I think she knows she fucked up with Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan. Yet apparently she doesn't know that she's fucked up with Chad Brinker, but we'll see. And Amy Adams Strunk hates Mike Vrabel. The no video tribute to Vrabel, I think that comes from the very top. That either comes from Amy directly saying, don't you dare do it, or it comes from one of her lieutenants, Burke Nihill, Chad Brinker, knowing that that would erupt Mount Amy if they were to play a video thanking Vrabel for his contributions. Again, they played a video for Jeff Fisher, and it wasn't like Jeff Fisher left on great terms. So Amy hates Vrabel, and Vrabel hates Amy. So if he wins this game, Mike McCoy, and she wins this game, it will be like Sharon Moore at Michigan, losing every single meaningful game last year except Ohio State. And because you beat Ohio State, everybody's going to give you the benefit of the doubt. At least you beat them. And so I am convinced if Mike McCoy wins this game for her, and if he is smart enough in the locker room after the game is over, and this is assuming she goes, which I have bet Kuharsky $20 that she will not. But if she's in the locker room after the game and they beat Mike Vrabel, Mike McCoy better give Amy Adams Strunk a game ball. Because, again, this is personal for her. This may not be personal for you because you may like Mike Vrabel. It may not be personal for you because, again, what feeling do you have? You didn't get embarrassed by Mike Vrabel. You didn't get disrespected by Mike Vrabel. But it is personal to her. And, by the way, have you noticed that Amy does react emotionally sometimes? And so I'm convinced if he wins this game for her, he will be on the radar to be the next coach, which means I expect Mike McCoy to empty whatever bag they have and he has on Sunday. I expect it totally emptied. I think that's why they claimed in New England Thomas Odukoya on the practice squad so they could try to figure out what's in the bag. And Vrabel probably thinks that Odukoya is smart enough to be able to relay some of that information. So because of the situation, the Vrabel special, the interim coach bounce, the fact that the game is the Titans Super Bowl, and the fact that Mike Vrabel hasn't changed, I'm taking the Titans on Sunday. Titans 24, Patriots 13. Put me down. That's the first thing here on Hot Take Friday. I do want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are the presenting sponsor of the Stillman Company program, and we are incredibly thankful to Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990. They are family owned and operated, and they have 100% of satisfaction of happy you'll be or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. Trust me on this. I use Hiller in my home. They can do the same for you. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Hiller is professional, experienced, and trustworthy. Again, something I can vouch for because they do work at my home. And their technicians come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it every time. Care is their core value, meaning they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. And they will take care of the customer on every job every time. Again, something I can attest to. Hiller, proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. And a big one this week for Tennessee and Vandy. And I know they're pulling for him. Hiller, call the Happy Face truck today. So that's the first thing. By the way, I have left time today. I do want to get to some of your chats, comments today. I do want to do some of that. Number two, and I know this is going to piss some people off, but I don't care. I already have $20 on the game because I bet Kuharsky $20 that Amy Adams Strunk will not show to the game on Sunday because I think she's afraid Vrabel's going to kick her ass and she just doesn't want to be there for that. And they asked me on the Felger and Maz program in Boston yesterday how Vrabel would rub her nose in it. And I said, if you hear Vrabel talking about collaboration after the game, or if he gives Todd Downing a game ball or something like that, then you know he's sticking it to her. Because the hate runs deep between the two. And it was very passive-aggressive, and it was very childish between the two of them. I mean, I recapped the story about the Patriot comments when Vrabel got up there and said, it's not as good here, it's not as good everywhere else as it is here. Trust me. And I said, is he talking about it here? And that's when Vrabel turned it around on me and said, you'll never think like me, Jared. And I just was talking about the Super Bowls and everything. That was the opportunity for Vrabel to say, no, I'm trying to build this here. And then Amy awaited for Vrabel to go to her and for him to say, hey, I wasn't talking about you. I love it here, blah, blah, blah. And he never did. And Amy took that personally. And Amy took the fact that Vrabel didn't want her to hire Rand Carthon personally. Now, Vrabel was probably right about that, but again, that's not going to stop Amy from taking it personally. And I think Mike Vrabel kind of felt like his success as coach of the Titans was simply because of him and was underappreciated by the loser owner that fired him. But I have to ask a question. If I was to sit down with Amy, and this would probably be question 35 on the list because there's so much other stuff I wonder. But I do wonder when it comes to Amy Adams Strunk and her decision to fire Mike Vrabel and the reaction that the Titan fans and everybody else have presented, because again, there is a feeling like she fired the great Mike Vrabel. How dare she? But I would love to ask Amy, who do you miss more, Mike Vrabel or Jon Robinson? Because God as my witness, I will go to my grave thinking that Jon Robinson was more responsible for the success that the Titans had between 2019 and 2021 than Mike Vrabel was. I will believe that. And you're going to tell me that I'm friends with J-Rob or Floyd was friends with J-Rob, so it doesn't count. And trust me, when J-Rob was the general manager, I always liked J-Rob, but I don't think J-Rob always liked me, to be completely honest. And I was on his ass. I asked him like 4 times in a draft press conference before the 2022 draft, what happened in the 2019 draft, because that was a good draft that I'm trying to figure out how you had the good draft and then the 2 bad drafts. And I know that pissed him off. But I still think that Jon Robinson was more responsible for the success than Mike Vrabel. And I know that that's not what the narrative is. The narrative is that the great Mike Vrabel came into this helpless franchise and turned them into quasi-winners, and it was all because of the great Mike Vrabel. Had nothing to do with the players, had nothing to do with the fact that they were actually winning before Mike Vrabel got there. It's just everybody get on your knees and thank the great Mike Vrabel for all the work that he did. I know the narrative. J-Rob sucks. He traded A.J. Brown. He took Caleb Farley and Isaiah Wilson. But it's almost like everybody thinks J-Rob just sat there and said, him. And that Mike Vrabel wasn't a part of almost all of that. Now, I think Vrabel did go out of his way in front of the cameras to make it obvious that he wasn't in favor of the A.J. trade, because it's not like that was a surprise. Vrabel knew that that was coming. But he acted like that because, again, he lets everybody know, don't put this on me, and that's fine. But it's not like every bad player that the Titans drafted under J-Rob and Vrabel didn't have Vrabel's involvement. And when it comes to drafting players, there is a very important part which equals success, and that is the development of those players. And I'll use Malik Willis as an example, because for 2 years with Mike Vrabel as the coach, Malik Willis didn't look like he could play quarterback for a high school football team, much less in the NFL. He goes to Green Bay, and he looks like a solid NFL backup. Again, I don't think anybody thinks Malik Willis is going to be a franchise quarterback, but I think we can agree the way Malik Willis has played in Green Bay is far better than anything that Malik Willis did here under Vrabel. In fact, the Malik Willis in the preseason with the Titans under Bonehead Brian Callahan looked better than anything Mike Vrabel coached him to do. And again, I get it. Vrabel is a bro's bro. The John Gruden lovers loved Mike Vrabel even more. He dips, he rips heaters, he talks shit, he won Super Bowls as a player. They love him. Again, if I was Zen, I would be on the phone with John Gruden and Mike Vrabel to market my product. Vrabel is smart. He is a very hard worker. But I do mean this seriously. Was Mike Vrabel really that good as the head coach of the Tennessee Titans? And I use this context because, again, the great Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are, which is what a lot of people believe until that becomes inconvenient to the argument of whatever subjective opinion about a coach they want to put out there. But I use this context. Mike Mularkey was hated by Titans fans. Hated. And the reason why Mike Mularkey was hated was because they didn't want to hire him when he was, I think it was 18 and 32 as a head coach in 2 years at Buffalo and 1 year at Jacksonville before taking the Titans job as the interim coach that kept the full-time tag. But that's just a feeling. They hated Mularkey. Subjective. He inherited the worst team in the NFL with Marcus Mariota and Matt Castle at quarterback. And he won for 2 years 56% of his games and half of his playoff games. The great Mike Vrabel won 55% of his games and was 2-3 in the playoffs. And that was mostly with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, who, granted, not exactly Brett Favre, but better than Marcus Mariota. In fact, I had a coach from the Mularkey coaching staff tell me that they said, I mean, they had Tannehill. Like, we loved Marcus, but Marcus is a backup. They had Tannehill, much better than Mariota. And that should be noted. Without Mike Vrabel even here, the great Mike Vrabel, Jon Robinson took the worst team in the league and made them a winning team right away by adding guys like Ben Jones, DeMarco Murray, Jack Conklin, Kevin Byard, Rashard Matthews, Derrick Henry. They got Josh Klein, their starting right guard, off of waivers in the first year. Vrabel wants to draft a guard with the 11th pick. And they went 9-7 twice, and they went to the playoffs. Without Jon Robinson, Mike Vrabel was 6-11 in 2023. And with some modicum of power, Vrabel was a part of the decision to draft a guard with the 11th overall pick and was part of the decision to sign Aaron Brewer to a second-round tender restricted free agent contract, paying him $4 million to play center. They didn't have a punt returner when they entered the season, trying out Kyle Phillips for the 18,000th time. And they kept Craig Aukerman on the staff while lazily hiring his buddy for offensive coordinator and elevating the third offensive line assistant who had no NFL experience. That was the year where Vrabel was by himself without J-Rob. So again, I know the narrative is the great Mike Vrabel carried a rudderless organization to the top. But Jon Robinson was a big part of that. When people were telling me that I shouldn't want Arthur Smith to be the next head coach of the Titans, they'll tell me that Arthur Smith was good because he had A.J. Brown and Corey Davis and Derrick Henry and Jonnu Smith and Ben Jones and Taylor Lewan, and 90% of those guys were brought in by Robinson. So if Robinson sucks, then Arthur must be really good. And if Arthur sucks, then Robinson must be really good. But you can't have it both ways. So again, I know the narrative. The entire country thinks Titans stink, and the Titans in their current form do stink. And they think that this organization went down the shitter the day they got rid of Mike Vrabel. I'm convinced it's the day they got rid of Jon Robinson. Again, after a couple cocktails, maybe a little truth serum, I'd like to ask Amy, which of those two moves do you regret more, Vrabel or Robinson? And I wonder, you were there, Amy. Who do you give more credit to? So that's the second thing, again, on the return of the great Mike Vrabel. So there is a storyline in this game that I don't think is getting talked about a lot, simply because there are so many other better storylines to talk about in this game. And trust me, I get it. You know, again, the Titans are terrible and Vrabel's coming, home to roost, and Vrabel wants to win this game by 55 points. I already know that. But if this were a normal game, and for a shitload of reasons, it's not a normal game, and there are pretty exciting storylines in this game, but if this were a normal game, one thing that I think would be worth talking about is the Cam Ward versus Drake Maye storyline. Two young up-and-coming quarterbacks, both high draft picks, both have to be the face of their franchise in order for their franchises to have any success. And one guy right now, Drake Maye, is 7th in the NFL in QBR, and Cam Ward is 33rd. Now, truthfully, I love Drake Maye, and I would have taken Drake Maye number 1 overall. The way the Titans took Cam Ward with this guy is so talented, this guy is so good, this guy has so much potential that I am sorry, New York Giants, you're calling, you want to get up to number 1, but Drake Maye's on the board. We're taking Drake Maye. You know how much I love Sam Darnold and how much I talk about Sam Darnold and how much I say, hey, what about Daniel Jones? What about Aaron Rodgers? What about Mac Jones? I would not have considered it. If Drake Maye was on the board at number 1, I would have drafted Drake Maye. And I didn't feel that way about Cam. The truth is, over a 5-year period, about 10 franchise quarterbacks emerge from the first round. And about 2 to 4 of those first rounders end up being elite quarterbacks. A franchise quarterback to me is a quarterback who gets multiple contracts, and whenever you say, who's the quarterback of that team, everybody knows. And there is a difference between franchise quarterback and elite franchise quarterback. Elite franchise quarterback is that guy gives that team a chance to win every game, and he puts the organization on his back. Jared Goff, franchise quarterback, not an elite franchise quarterback. So I took 2017 to 2022, which is, I guess, technically a 6-year period, but we'll use that because I think we know by now if you were drafted in 2021 or 2022, we know if you're a franchise quarterback or not. Of the first round picks, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence emerged as franchise guys who got second contracts. Again, Trevor Lawrence is the franchise quarterback of the Jacksonville Jags, and that's not going to change even if Trevor kind of stinks. That is 10. 11 if you want to count Daniel Jones, who got a second contract, but they declined the fifth-year option on him, and it was always kind of like the Giants were in let's see mode with Daniel Jones. So I don't put him in the same category as a Kyler Murray, who that team was like, 3 years in, Kyler, here's the deal. But of that group, Mahomes, Watson, Allen, Jackson, Murray, Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, Lawrence, only 4 guys are universally agreed to be elite quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. 5, if you want to count Baker Mayfield, who was drafted during that time period, and I believe has crossed the Rubicon into the elite quarterback territory, but he does it for a different team. So long story short, the current crop of young quarterbacks, and again, you can decide subjectively when to start, when to end. I decided let's start at 2023. So that current crop, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart. Now, I know Anthony Richardson and Will Levis could be thrown in there, but they've already been discarded. That's 11 guys. History says 2, 3, 4 of that group will be elite. One of them is Jaden Daniels. He looks to be elite, which means that at most there are 3 other elite quarterbacks from that crop, and the rest turn into Jameis Winston. And I would bet on Drake May. And there's just something about Drake May. I can't totally explain it. There is something about Drake May that I absolutely freaking love. It's like he's a fluid athlete. He's big. He's got a good arm. He's accurate. He is a really, really solid prospect. Now, I hate that Mike Vrabel is his coach for the quarterback development, but the owner did hire Josh McDaniels to be the offensive coordinator. And with the owner stepping in and keeping Todd Downing, or the owner stepping in and keeping Tim Kelly away from being the offensive coordinator of the Patriots, I think Drake May might have a shot. So I am betting on Drake May, and I'm betting against Cam. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, I do think is probably going to be an elite franchise quarterback, if not maybe one step below that. Kind of where Justin Herbert lives right now. I think CJ Stroud might be there. Jaden Daniels is going to be an elite franchise quarterback. It looks that way. Caleb's personality just drives me nuts, and apparently drives Troy Aikman's personality, or his personality drives Troy Aikman nuts too. I think it's too early on Penix, Bo Nix, JJ, and Jackson Dart. I'm going to bet on May to be one of those 3 other elite quarterbacks that emerge out of here. I'm betting against Cam. And the Titans are betting all in on Cam, regardless of who the coach is. And if Cam is going to be the guy, and I know that this team has a lot of issues besides Cam, and last year the Patriots had a lot of issues besides Drake, and Drake didn't win a lot of games, and Drake didn't have very good stats. But if this is going to work with Cam, one of the things Cam has to do is he has to beat his contemporaries. He has to beat the guys that are his age or close, who are picked in the same mold, who are viewed the same as franchise guys. That's how you elevate. That's why Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, that's such a battle when they play. Brady versus Manning. That's why that's such a battle. And again, not to say that Cam versus May is Brady versus Manning. But do you want to know who Tom Brady's first victory as an NFL quarterback came against? It came against Peyton Manning. And nobody at that time knew that it was Brady, Manning, this contemporary battle. So this is a low-key fascinating storyline. That is, if Cam's the guy, Cam's going to outplay the other guys that are in his same kind of bushel, if that makes any sense. So that I actually am kind of excited for, because when it comes to the game on Sunday, these are young quarterbacks we're going to get to see. And for that, I'm at least a little bit excited. I also want to throw back up the coaching board, the Las Jared Casino and Sportsbook, the odds for the next Titans coach. Now, these may change week to week, because as of right now, the 2026 odds, Matt Nagy right now is currently the favorite, because I think Chad Brinker is going to be stripped of some power after this season goes to absolute dog shit and they win 3 games or 2 games or something like that. And Mike Borgonzi will be given more power, because that's how Amy operates. So as of right now, Matt Nagy's the leader in the clubhouse at plus 250. I've got Mike McCoy at plus 450. And if Mike McCoy were to win this game, I would say you can bump him up to maybe number 2 or number 1. And I know people don't want to hear that, but I think I'd throw him up if Mike McCoy were to win this game, because Amy will be so happy. She will be so happy if they win this game that she might just make him the head coach, period. The same way that Mike Mularkey ended up, and I don't know what he did to earn her faith, but he somehow, some way earned her faith. And I think we'll see some of that. Okay, today on the program, I actually decided to leave some time in between six-pack picks and everything else to get to your reaction, because I do feel like this week we haven't been taking a lot of your reaction, just with all of the news and all of the drama and all of the gossip and all of the bullcrap. And so I go through this and I say, you know what? I want to hear what people have to say. So let's get into this. The distinguished gentleman says, we got to disagree. We are not going to dismiss the great coaching that he did, talking about Mike Vrabel. To be fair, Mike Vrabel won Coach of the Year. So again, this goes back to that Robinson-Vrabel discussion where, and I'm trying to be as fair as possible. They were the number 1 seed in 2021. And Mike Vrabel won Coach of the Year because they had all those injuries. Guys like Derrick Henry got hurt. Guys like Julio Jones got hurt. They had all those injuries throughout the course of the year, and they were able to recover and be the number 1 seed in the AFC playoffs. And there is something to the coaching on that. But who went out and got Deontay Foreman? Who was a big part when they had those injuries? That was Robinson. So they went out and played with 90 players, and they got great performances out of guys like that. And the defense, which was god-awful the year before, was much improved, thanks in large part to Danico Autry and Bud Dupree when he was healthy and Jackrabbit Jenkins. And so we just dismiss all of that. And we say, oh, no. When it came to pass with Mike Vrabel, he gets all the credit, and the other guy who had success gets, before Vrabel showed up, gets no credit. And I have a problem with that. Jude says, I would have to think the Titans would have remained relevant and competitive if J-Rob and Vrabel had stayed and A.J. Brown was never traded. Jack Conklin was paid and Derrick Henry was here. So I think there's some revisionist history on the Conklin stuff, because with Conklin, he had multiple massive injuries. And this was back when I believed that the salary cap was real, but as I've always said, the money is real. So if the Titans were to have paid Jack Conklin the money, they would have been investing whatever it ended up being, 17 million, 18 million, whatever. They would have been investing top of the market money in a right tackle in order to pay somebody who had missed large chunks of seasons because of knee injuries. So that would have been a risk The same as some of the other injury stuff that we said, oh, wow, that's a risk too. And it's not like Jack Conklin hasn't been an injury issue in Cleveland. Everybody's like, Jack Conklin, he would have been the savior of this, and he would have. Jack Conklin gets hurt all the time in Cleveland. In fact, Jack Conklin this year has played 3 games. Last year played 12 games. The year before that played 1 game. In 2021, he played 7 games. Jack Conklin was an All-Pro in 2020, the year the Titans had the second ranked offense in the NFL, and they did it with Dennis Kelly and David Quessenberry as their starting tackles. Conklin would not have helped you through the mess playing 7 games a year. So Conklin was an injury risk. They didn't end up paying Conklin, and Conklin has gone to Cleveland, and outside of 1 season where he was an All-Pro, he's been hurt. So I have a hard time with that one. And on the AJ front, I absolutely think Robinson and Amy and everybody got a little hoodwinked by Tory Dandy, the agent, who I've told this story before, and I've told this story to Tory Dandy. AJ Brown was going around Nashville telling people, and I know this for a fact, AJ Brown was going around town telling people that he was going to sign a 4-year, $80 million contract with the Titans. That would have been $20 million a season. That was the going rate at that time because Mike Williams and Chris Godwin had signed for $20 million a season. Williams and Godwin were represented by Tory Dandy, as was A.J. Brown, as was DK Metcalf, as was Deebo Samuel. Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams end up getting traded and sign bigger contracts. And Christian Kirk goes to Jacksonville for $17 million a year when nobody thought Christian Kirk was that good. Now the market's exploded. So what AJ thought he was getting and what the Titans thought they were doing was $20 million a year. Again, this is not unlike Jerry Jones saying that he and Micah Parsons shook hands on a contract, even though that doesn't end the deal. But that can lead to animosity when you think, hey, we've got a deal for $80 million, and now $80 million isn't good enough. Vrabel reportedly told AJ, be patient. Your time will come. You will get your contract. Tory Dandy told AJ, cut off communication with the team. Let me handle it. At some point, the Titans felt disrespected by AJ. There were question marks about his knee, which was an issue 2 years ago in Philadelphia. And I think the AJ Twitter fingers and attitude was starting to get to the Titans. And this was when we thought the Patriot way was real, at least some of us. And they said, I don't know if we can do that. And by the way, the AJ Twitter fingers and attitude, kind of a problem right now in Philadelphia, right? So I think Robinson bungled that. He should have held to his leverage on AJ and basically told Tory Dandy to fuck off and could have just said, I'll make you play for the $3 million this year, and I'll make you play on the franchise tag next year, and I'll make you play on the franchise tag after that if you don't leave me the fuck alone and sign a contract or stop acting like an a-hole. That I think should have happened. And I put that on Robinson. But I don't think it's as simple as everybody makes it out to be. That is, oh, if they had kept A.J. Brown, they would have won a Super Bowl. Because that's what I feel like people seem to think. Oh, they traded A.J., and if they had not traded A.J., oh, my God, it could have been incredible. Oh, my God. By the way, thank you to the distinguished gentleman for saying violate the like button. Everybody, right now on YouTube, we got 165 watching, which is about par for the course on a Friday. Usually we're in the 200-ish at a time when it's not a Friday. But if you're one of the 165 right now, hit that like button. I mean, I don't, who knows? Nashville Jazz says, after today's podcast, JetBlue will never let Jared fly to Logan International. LOL. First of all, I don't fly JetBlue. And secondly, I don't like flying into Logan International. I much rather fly into the Manchester, New Hampshire airport. Now, I did live in Manchester, New Hampshire, but I much rather fly into the Manchester, New Hampshire airport because it is so small and so quiet and so easy. And Logan is one of those airports like Atlanta or Chicago, or no, thank you. That one I have an issue. Kelsey says, do you think Todd Downing has a car service in New England? Somebody tweeted out. See, the problem with Twitter nowadays is nobody knows, like, if the person who's tweeting something is being serious or if somebody out there, like, is some troll account or like a real account. And when they used to not pay for the blue check marks, you used to know, okay, this is a real person versus this is not a real person or whatever. And somebody tweeted out yesterday, and it ended up in my For You tab, but it was Chad Brinker should be, or no, I said Chad Brinker, same kind of bozo, Todd Downing. So he said Todd Downing should be getting head coaching looks. And I was laughing my ass off thinking, look, I understand what it's like when Mike Vrabel wins as the coach and how you can get caught up in all the hype. And I understand, hey, Vrabel started off 3-1 here in 2018. Vrabel, after his second year, was in an AFC title game. There is some sort of aphrodisiac that comes from having Mike Vrabel as your coach, especially at the beginning. But we're sitting here talking about Todd Downing for a head coaching job. That I don't understand. Todd Downing. Robbie Stanley chimes in on the YouTube chat. I wonder how long Robbie can do this until he gets in trouble. And says, Patriots 34, Titans 10. I guess Robbie's not listening to celebrity birthdays. He says, Patriots 34, Titans 10. I saw Kuharsky put out a story. When we did a football show on Tuesday on the 440 Sports Network, Paul and I talked about it. And I said, look, I'm going to take the Titans on Sunday because I've lived through the Vrabel special. And I know that what goes up, beating Russell Wilson in overtime on the road in Seattle, must come down losing to Zach Wilson on the road in New York. That what goes up losing to Kyle Allen and Carolina in 2019, followed by beating Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, must come down. And Paul was like, I don't pick games, but if I pick games, I would. And apparently he wrote a story at paulkuharsky.com where he said, I don't pick games, but I'm going to pick this game, and it's going to be a bloodbath. And 100% of the people out there think it's going to be a bloodbath on Sunday. And I understand it. And if I didn't know Vrabel and I didn't know the Titans and I didn't know the situation, I would say New England's going to kick the shit out of them. But this is the NFL. And the biggest liability the Titans had, other than some of the mistakes Rand Carthon made, the biggest liability they had on Sundays was their head coach, and he's gone. And there is an interim coach boost, and they are playing at home, and this is their Super Bowl. And Vrabel is already getting cocky. Vrabel's already feeling himself. Vrabel's already taking shots at the officials. Again, I remember when Vrabel sent that passive-aggressive email saying to the referees, hey, can you get the referees to look at these cuts you're sending us? Because these referees, we want consistency. Vrabel's basically accusing the referees of not working hard enough. That is a terrible idea if you're a coach. So now all of a sudden there might be a couple of pass interferences on Sunday that go against Vrabel because Vrabel went and pissed the refs off this week because he can't help himself. And Vrabel does that when he gets cocky. Remember, they went on the road to Cleveland in 2023, Vrabel's last year. And they lost to Deshaun Watson, who was playing worse than Cam Ward is now. And in that game, Deshaun took a snap and fumbled it and kicked it backwards and picked it up and I think got a first down or something embarrassing. They were going for points down by 10 right before halftime. And they were inside the 10-yard line. They had a shot at a field goal for sure. And they could have kicked or they could have tried for one more play to get a touchdown. Vrabel decides with no timeouts to run another play. And somehow Myles Garrett ends up singled up on Andre Dillard. Sack, halftime, down by 10. They lost that game to the shit Browns. The next week, they played Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And they beat them by 20. That's the Vrabel special. And so now you're going to tell me the Vrabel special doesn't exist anymore? Even though we saw the Vrabel special for 6 years? And I know, again, the Vrabel special is usually defined by a win or a loss. But do you guys remember that Sunday night football game at Kansas City when Malik Willis played? Tannehill had the ankle injury. It was questionable all week whether or not he was going to go. Malik, who didn't look like he could play dead in a Western, was starting at quarterback against the Chiefs, and that game went to overtime. That is the Vrabel special. So, again, every time something good happens, something bad. They beat Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. There is going to be a bad that happens. Alex says, the great Mike Vrabel sounds like it needs to be followed by some trumpet fanfare. I mean, I think, that's how I use a little guarantee when I do a guarantee. I think the great Mike Vrabel kind of says all it needs to is all it needs to be. The great Mike Vrabel, the greatest coach to have lost 3 straight playoff games, including 2 at home. Alan says, don't forget Nashville SC. What did Nashville SC do? You're going to have to tell me what Nashville SC did because I don't know. And I don't have a serious issue when it comes to Nashville SC, but they won some sort of championship. I'm like, is that the MLS championship? Nope. Then I'm like, okay, whatever. What kind of championship is that? I don't know. Sean says the players on this team are not good enough to take advantage of any possible coach bump, no matter who the coach is. Let me say this. You're not the single worst team in the history of the NFL. You're just not that bad. You're bad. You're just not that bad. And so I understand that there's probably some sentiment here that, even if there was a Vrabel special, even if there was a bounce, even if there was, then there's, guys, you lost to Zach Wilson when Vrabel was the coach. You lost to the 4-13 Texans when Vrabel was the coach. Remember that game that sealed up the number 1 seed in 2021 where Davis Mills and Danny Amendola just went absolutely ham in the second half, and they almost kept you from getting the number 1 seed that year? They almost beat you twice. That's a typical Vrabel team. When they are supposed to win, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, Vrabel cannot get them up. I can't totally explain it. The distinguished gentleman says he thinks the Titans are going to win by 3. TDG, I love you, baby. I really do. But you always think the Titans are going to win. That's why I think it's actually more meaningful when it comes from me, because I don't really think that the Titans usually ever have a chance to actually win a game. Okay, it's time for 6-pack picks. And last week, I felt like I did terribly last week. I was like, oh God, this was awful. This was terrible. Goodness gracious, what are we going to do? And then I actually looked at it. I went 3-3. Thank you, Sam Darnold. Thank you, Vegas Raiders, or Brian Callahan. And thank you to Baltimore for being terrible. And so we did win 3 of our games. We lost 3. Boy, the college weekend, I thought Tennessee was going to blow out Arkansas. They won. They didn't blow them out. And I got to give credit where credit is due. I thought Oregon was going to beat the ever-living crap out of Indiana, who I always feel like is good, but they're not really that good. And I got to give Indiana credit. Indiana went in there and kicked that ass. And I was in a wedding last Saturday, so I didn't see the game, and I texted my dad. And I said, what happened? What happened to Oregon? And he said they got beat by a better team. So congratulations to Indiana and Kurt Cignetti, who just signed a new contract. And he signed a new contract because of Penn State. But this is something that these colleges don't understand. You have a coach who wins a little. You start treating him like he's a national title winning coach. You give him a contract like he's a national title contending coach. And then you get mad when he doesn't contend for a title. Indiana's never contended for a title. Indiana's not going to win the title. But hey, go ahead, do what you want to do. With that, it is time for 6-pack picks. And this week, it's going to be a little different than normal, because normally in 6-pack picks, we do 2 college games, 3 NFL games. But the NFL slate, kind of shitty. College slate, great. A triple header on ESPN, ABC. Actually, it's on ABC. I don't know why I said ESPN. We start with game number 1. 11 a.m. tomorrow, right here in Nashville. LSU at Vandy. Vandy, favored by 1.5. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'm going to go LSU 20-10. And this is all about the helmet. And I told this, when I was on Mad Dog Radio before the Alabama-Vanderbilt game, and I said, I see those two helmets. I see an Alabama helmet, and I see a Vanderbilt helmet, and I'm like, I just don't think that those two helmets belong together. And when it came to the game and they actually played, I actually thought Vanderbilt might have been the better team, and Diego Pavia turned the ball over twice. But I couldn't pick Vanderbilt to win that game, and I can't pick Vanderbilt to win this one. They are favored by 1.5 because LSU's offense is so shitty, and I don't know what's going to happen to Brian Kelly if they lose this, but I'll take LSU 20-10. Give me LSU. Game number 2, immediately following LSU Vandy. Ole Miss, 5th ranked in the country. Georgia, ranked 9th, 7.5-point favorites. That number is a massive number. That is a number that my dad says is a fuck you number, meaning they put it out at 7.5. You look at the spread and you say, there's no way Ole Miss is going to lose by 7.5. They may lose, but they're not going to lose by 7.5. So you take Ole Miss and then Georgia boat races them. I am going to take Georgia, playing at Georgia, revenge for last year, Georgia 21, Ole Miss 17. I think Ole Miss covers the 7.5. So I will take Ole Miss, but I think Georgia will win the game. And then the third Saturday in October, Tennessee, Alabama, 6:30 ABC primetime. Alabama, 7.5-point favorites, hosting Tennessee. Give me Alabama. I don't know why. I think this is set up for Tennessee to cover that massive spread because Tennessee didn't play their best last week against Arkansas. Maybe they were looking ahead to Alabama. Alabama keeps flirting with danger. This is not the Nick Saban Alabama. But Ty Simpson, Alabama, too much for Tennessee. I'll take Alabama 31-20. I think Alabama will cover the 7.5. So give me that. Again, I said it was a kind of lame, like a very lame NFL weekend. And it kind of is. But there is a doubleheader on Monday Night Football, and I kind of hate the doubleheaders on Monday Night Football, which are going away. But there is a doubleheader that I kind of like. Tampa Bay, Detroit, 6 o'clock, ABC and ESPN. Detroit, -5.5. Last week, I picked Detroit to go into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs, and I lost. I'm going to double down on Detroit. I'll take Detroit 31-24. I, for some reason, think that Tampa Bay's defense, which is normally pretty good, they've had a lot of injuries. I think Detroit has a get-right game after the Kansas City one. I know Brian Branch is suspended. I'll still take Detroit. I think they cover the 5.5. Then, at 9 o'clock Central Time, which before I was a parent, 9 o'clock Central Time was fine for me. Now, I might be asleep by kickoff of this game. But Seattle and Houston, in Seattle 3.5-point favorites. I bet Seattle last week, and they covered against Jacksonville. I'm betting on Seattle again. The Sam Chi's quarterback, Sam Darnold, 27-10 over Houston. And the reason I'm going with Seattle, and I feel very certain about this, is because I believe that Houston sucks. That I believe that DeMeco Ryans was kind of a one-hit wonder, and a lot of things went their way, and they overreacted last year. And I think Houston kind of blows. Seattle 27, Houston 10. And finally, the game of the week, the Titans and the Patriots. New England 6.5-point favorite. CBS, noon kickoff. Let me get my CBS music just so that we've got that feel. New England 6.5-point favorites. Everybody is going to take the Patriots. Everybody. And everybody's going to take the Patriots to dog walk the Titans. And that's fine. The Vrabel special. Tennessee 24, New England 13. And I remember before that Jets game in 2021, when I picked the Jets in 6-pack picks, and I was saving it all week because I knew after the Titans barely beat the Colts that previous week and they were not headed in the right direction, I said, they are going to lose to the Jets. And I held it back until the very, very end. And I put it out there, and Caroline, who was kind of new to working with me at the time, accused me of basically being a homer, saying, oh, yeah, or being a contrarian. I said, no, I'm taking the Jets. And Zach Wilson and Corey Davis went out there and bombed the ball all over the Titans. I am taking Tennessee to win 24-13. That will do it for us today on the program. A reminder, post-game live comes up as soon as the Titans game is over. And I will say, we may have a special post-game live, just to be completely frank with everybody. We may have a special post-game live. I haven't decided yet. We may have a special one after the college games tomorrow because the college slate is freaking nasty. So I want to thank Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical for our presenting sponsors on this Hot Take Friday. Again, like and subscribe. And, of course, check out the 440 Sports Network, a football show. Nick Suss and I, PK and I earlier this week as well. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game. Stillman Company, post-game live Sunday as soon as the final whistle. We will see you then.